Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new around here, then my name is Katie. I'm a full-time mixed media sketchbook artist, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing lots of different ways that you can fill your own. I'm going to be sharing 8 main ideas with you, but I'll also be talking through lots of different techniques as I share those. So this video is going to be packed full of inspiration and ideas for you to fill your pages. I absolutely love working in my sketchbook, so I hope this provides some inspiration, and let's get on with idea number 1. So my first idea is to paint some landscapes in your sketchbook. Now obviously I know that I am very much a landscape artist and that it's a very broad subject that I've just mentioned. But I want to share lots of different ways that you can find references for landscapes, so hopefully that will help give you some inspiration. I'm merging 4 different ones here and I'm using gouache, but you can use your favourite mediums. There's absolutely no limits to what you can use in sketchbooks generally, so I would say pick your favourite medium and go with that. I really enjoyed using this warmer toned colour palette for this landscape here on the top right, but I really enjoy trying out different landscapes from different areas of the world because they have such different vegetation and different architecture, and I've talked about this on my channel before, but I think that practicing different things from the usual things that you see around you is a really nice way to practice. So on a basic level that would be like the trees and the vegetation around you, maybe the shrubs, the different flowers that might not grow in your part of the world. But it also affects your colours, it affects your colour palette and the way that you put marks down. Perhaps you live in the desert and there's a lot more spiky plants versus the more verdant and lush ones that I have in my country. I think it's a really nice way to play around. So as much as landscapes might sound a little bit boring or a little bit obvious, I think it's a really nice way to practice different things. So let me just mention all of the different ways you can find landscapes. So there is Google Maps, and using Street View, I think that's a really fun way to not necessarily control what you're going to draw, but be taken somewhere in the world. I really like Map Crunch for the randomness of that. You can also use your own holiday photos, so using your vacation snaps to draw from there. And if you don't have any yourself, then use your family and friends and ask them to send you photos from places that they visited. I think there's a huge array of wonderful landscapes out there to be painted, and it's a really easy way to fill a spread. Okay, so idea 2, I'm again using gouache, but that's just because that's my preferred medium. But for this one, and if you've been on my channel before and for many years, you'll probably know that I do love painting fish. It was my go-to when I was doing my daily art challenge and I didn't know what to draw. So it doesn't have to be fish for you, it could be another animal or something that you enjoy drawing, but I really recommend setting a timer. Especially when I was doing my daily art challenge, it felt a little bit daunting to create every day, but putting a time limit on my creativity made it feel a bit more manageable. I didn't just sit at my desk wondering how I was going to fill a spread. I sat at my desk knowing I had 20 minutes to fill a spread, and then I could carry on with all the rest of the activities in my day. So for me, it really helped when I was doing that challenge, and I just really enjoy it because it keeps me loose. You know, I'm a big advocate for timers on my channel and in art in general, and just painting something that I really enjoyed doing, really upping the saturation and painting these fish was a really fun subject for me. So you can see that I put down the colours first, so I don't like to sketch, that's also because of the time limit, that I didn't have time for it to be accurate. And it also means that I'm loose, I'm not worried about making it perfect, and I think that's a really good way to approach art. I don't want things to feel really tight. I like just playing around with the subject and changing the colours sometimes and just having fun with it with my mediums, layering things on top. And so for me, filling a spread with fish in 20 minutes is a really fun one. Like I said, you don't have to pick fish. I know that some people don't like that as a subject, but you're welcome to pick anything. I just really recommend doing it to a timer. On some of these that I am showing you, there are full videos on my YouTube channel if you want to see the full process. So do let me know if you want any links down below in the comments. Okay, next up is just playing around with your media. I am a mixed media artist, but I'm sure even if you do focus on one medium more than others, you probably have some other mediums in your collection. So whether that's coloured pencils or maybe you've been gifted some art supplies from friends and family, try mixing them up together and see what happens. This spread was a really enjoyable one for me, and I shared this in one of my studio vlogs from last year, but it was just so full of colour and energy, and I really enjoyed this one. I used a huge amount of mediums here, and I think just the playful aspect of picking a medium based on its colour perhaps, rather than because you know you want to just use that medium, is a really nice way to approach art. So you don't need to have a million different mediums to create with, but I would just say focus on your colours and then grab the medium that matches. I've used a mix of Stabilo woody pencils here, which you'll see in a moment, Neocolors, gouache. I dipped my Derwent Inktense into water. I've also got some acrylic paint on there and some markers and some Tombos. So I really did throw a lot at this spread, but it's a really fun one for me. And I think really embracing that playful aspect in your sketchbooks is a really nice way to do it. If you'd like some subject recommendations, then I definitely recommend something like this with Under the Ocean because of the amount of colours. But you could also do something like a flower meadow or even a still life because there's lots of different colours there, and I definitely recommend just grabbing your mediums and seeing how you go and experimenting that way. I think we generally put a lot of pressure on ourselves as artists, so I think we should approach our sketchbooks as a way to loosen up and play, and this one definitely does that. Next up, I'm going to suggest the idea of drawing some wildflower studies in your sketchbook using just brush pens. So I'm using Tombow brush pens here. You can also use many other brands or even alcohol markers, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But I really love it. I really love the way that you can put down big blocks of colour and also layer them on top. It does depend on your paper stock how much you can layer, but because these are also water soluble, it meant I could blend out a little bit of the colour with some water. So I'm always a fan of playing around with your mediums, and like in the last one, I recommend just using them and seeing how you go. Whenever I get a new art supply, I just start playing and I don't look up tutorials or anything. I just start to play and I learn how to use it from there. And I definitely think this is similar. So I recommend layering things on top, coming in, seeing how they blend, and then adding on lots of bright colours just to make it really pop. I enjoy doing that with wildflowers because it works really well with that subject, and you'll see later on that I'm going to come in with some Neocolors just to go over the line work. So I'm just coming in with some pencil here, but that's another idea, is to create some extra colours on top by layering your pops of colour over. So I do come in with some brighter colours here. I've got the sky blue, I use the lemon yellow, I use the pink, and I just really like the way this really changes the wildflowers. Use your bright pops of colour to add to the line work so you can outline some areas and really highlight sections of it, and just going over some of the lines you've already created or some of the shapes, and it creates this really cool effect. So I think this one is a really fun one to play with. Even if you don't like drawing flowers, I think it's a really nice one to try in other areas in your sketchbook depending on the subject. Just adding these pops of colour and the line work on top really creates a playful spread, so something that you can play around with and I think quite versatile too. Next up is to document a day out in your sketchbook. So this is kind of similar to visual journaling, and in this spread I'm documenting a day out that I did with my husband Mitch. So again, I'm using gouache, but like I said, any of these can work with your medium of choice, but I think it's really fun to document a day out like this. I've taken elements from it, so we did this trail, and I've taken the icon from the sign just to blow that up, just to try and add some graphic elements. So you don't have to just do the views like I've got on the left, you can also highlight things that you did. You could draw the food that you ate, you could paint some little ticket stubs or add in other things that you see on the day. So it's really versatile, and I find it's a really lovely way to document your memories. I find when I paint something, I remember it better as well, and so that's always nice. I really remember this day because I painted this. So it's kind of another way to live it twice. I'm doing some daisies here as well. You can draw on location, I think that's definitely an option. But for me, I preferred to work from photos when I got home. But it's definitely an option to take your sketchbook with you, so that's another idea, is to do some plein air work. I've got a few videos on my channel where I've done that, and I've taken a selection of art supplies with me and then drawn whilst I was there. So it's up to you which you prefer, but this one was just so fun. I added in this cow at the bottom, which I think turned out pretty well considering I don't paint animals very much. But it's just a really nice way to document, so I really recommend doing it sort of journal style. For this one, I did add on some annotations as well, so that's more personal thoughts, and I think that's really nice to kind of merge your sketchbook with a diary, so you're writing more personal memories to go along with your paintings, and it just feels like your sketchbook is much more you. I think it creates a really strong connection, and it definitely helped me feel more attached to my sketchbook. Okay, my next idea is to play around with acrylic ink or any inks that you have. It doesn't have to be the acrylic based one, but then do some fruit studies in your sketchbook. So here I am painting some gourds and pumpkins from when I visited a National Trust property, took lots of photos, and then I came home and I really wanted a medium that was vibrant and easy to play around with. So I really liked putting down my colour first and then applying the ink to the page with the pipette. So as well as this main idea, another idea you can have is to use different tools to apply your mediums. Obviously I'm using the pipette here instead of dropping pigment onto my palette or straight onto the page. I do come in with some brushes as well and play around with the blending, but it's really fun to use different tools. You don't have to use specific art ones like brushes or pencils. You can use sticks from the garden and play around with the line work there. That's a really fun one I've seen a lot of artists do, but don't feel limited with your supplies. I've seen a lot of really fun textures created from people being creative with the stuff they use. So they've cut up brushes to make it work, they've used cardboard to create different textures and effects. So don't feel limited with what you're given. You can go outside and find things to play around with textures and add it into your sketchbook like that. So you can see here I am coming in on top just to neaten things up, but you can really see the different textures that's been created where I've put the acrylic ink on top. It's also fun to play around with wet on wet technique, so that's another idea for you. Have a play with your layers. Don't wait for everything to dry before you add on something on top. You can create some really nice blending effects and merging of colours by not waiting for that. So wet on wet is a really fun one and definitely something that I recommend playing around with. Here's the final spread of this one. You can see the vibrancy of the colours coming out here from the acrylic ink, but this could also work with watercolour or traditional inks as well. Next up is to use masking fluid. So this is a medium that is quite easy to get. I think it's quite available in most art shops, but it's really fun because it does make you think differently. For this piece, I wanted to create a greenhouse or this palm house. So I wanted to put down my masking fluid as the frame of the building. And I do definitely recommend if you're using this from a pot, then use a really cheap brush or coat your paintbrush with some soap or washing up liquid first because it will affect your bristles. But you have to wait for that to dry before then coming on with your paint. Basically, you can take off the masking fluid afterwards. So you can see I'm going straight over the masking fluid here, and that's okay because once the paint has dried, I'm again using acrylic ink here and a mix of gouache. You can peel it off. You can get masking fluid in pen form as well, and that can make it easier to apply if you want really fine details. But I enjoyed using this masking fluid in a pot. There are loads of different brands, but it's a really fun medium to use in a very different way. You can play around with negative space, so that's another idea. Negative space is a really fun one to explore, and it's just a very different technique and a different effect that you can get with anything else. I really love the satisfaction of peeling this off and creating that really clean white area underneath. It works really well for drawing greenhouses. You could do it for spiders' webs and things like that. I've seen Omar Wynn has done spider webs on her Patreon recently, but it's just a really fun one to play around with. So lots of different subjects that this can work with. And I think it's a medium that doesn't break the bank, but also forces you to create in different ways, which I think is always good to play around with in your sketchbook. Next up, I am again using my brush pens and I'm back in my sketchbook drawing some flowers. But this time the idea is to head on a walk and try and find the beauty around you. I know that can sound a little bit cheesy, but I was really surprised when I was doing this just how much there is around when I'm not in peak season. So I think we can take our local area for granted, and actually there's a lot of things that we don't necessarily notice. So I guess this is kind of like the art of noticing and seeing things that you wouldn't normally. I just went for a walk around my neighbourhood and there was so much colour when I really started to zoom in on the details. All of the flowers that I'm drawing here are technically weeds, but they still had plenty of colour on them. I'm drawing a dandelion here, but there are plenty of different flowers with different colours. And it doesn't matter, again, the medium that you use, but I think it's really nice to go out on a walk with the specific knowledge that you're sort of looking for interesting things to then draw. You could draw them on location again, but I prefer to take photos and then study them when I was back home. But it's a really nice way to sort of take stock of your surroundings a bit more and appreciate it more as well. I really loved how these turned out. I liked the contrast with the dark indigo pencil that I added on top and the colours, but it really did sort of change my thinking of the beauty around me. It was nice to be a bit more mindful on my walk, knowing I was going to find something to draw. And it doesn't have to be bright colours either. You could maybe be interested in the shape of leaves, or there's a really nice looking tree that you see on your walk that you've never really noticed before. I think it's a nice way to connect with your sketchbook and your surroundings around you, and also, again, have that personal connection because it's linked with your day-to-day. It doesn't have to be rural either. It could be urban scenes. So maybe you're on the bus and there's a sign that you really like and you want to study, maybe draw some of the typography and study some hand lettering that you see on your trip into town. There's some really lovely things around that we definitely take for granted. So I think this is a lovely one to be a bit more mindful and also get some creativity in as well. Again, I did add in some notes as well. That was really nice, kind of including some of my thoughts as well. So merging that journal and sketchbook aspect again. So those are all the ideas. I can talk about these for hours and hours and just come up with lots of different things. I tend to start with an idea and then something else spurs off from that, as you can tell from this quite rambly voiceover. But I hope it's inspired you. I hope it's given you some ideas, and a big thank you for watching. Thank you to my patrons for their support with this channel, and I hope you have a creative week ahead. I will see you next Sunday in my next YouTube video. See you later!